call. Just turned 10 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call the CFB stakeholder meeting to order. It is January 24th, 2024. My name is Gina Sanchez. I am the Bureau Chief of the Cemetery and Funeral Bureau. This is a stakeholder meeting, so it is different than an advisory committee meeting. This meeting, my goal is to really be conversational and really be an opportunity for all stakeholders, including committee members that are here, as well as attendees, to really have a conversation with the Bureau in regards to our sunset report. So our sunset review report was submitted to the legislature on January 4th. This is a 5-year report of what the program has accomplished. It has overview, statistics, attachments. It's quite voluminous. It's over 102 pages. So I don't want to be too overwhelming. So we're going to kind of take it section by section and just have some discussion about each section, and then I'll go into a lot more details and new issues. So for attendees and those committee members, please just speak up, put your hand up, type in the chat. We're not, besides for the next agenda item for public comment, we will not be stopping for public comment specifically. It's more of a conversation. So chip in anytime. I will stop all my talking and so on. I would like to welcome Jerry Desmond. We have somebody in person with us today, so that's exciting. Everyone else is online, and I see we have some attendees here as well, so welcome. I am going to move on to our first agenda item, which is, of course, there we go. Let's move the, second agenda order. I already called it to order. Sorry, David. Thank you. So public comment on items not on the agenda. This would be an opportunity to bring up to the Bureau anything not on in the sunset. So if anybody has anything to say here, I will pause for a minute for public comments.
And I'm David, I'm the moderator. Just want to let everyone know that instead of our usual Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner, we've replaced it with an open chat. So as Gina said, feel free to type in the chat. Please make sure that you are chatting to everyone so everyone can see your comments. And for anyone who wishes to speak, please feel free to raise a hand at any time. I see we have mobile device users. Mobile device users, you have 3 different screens, but only one of them shows the hand button. So you'll probably need to click that ellipses, the ... at the bottom of your screen in order to find your hand button. But go ahead, raise hands to ask to speak, type in the chat, whatever works. We will try to accommodate you as best as possible.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, David. Okay, so just pause for one more moment for any comments not on the agenda. Okay, not seeing anyone. Let's move to the meat of the meeting. So, 2024 Cemetery and Funeral Bureau Sunset Review Report. As I said, this report is for the past 5 years. Typically, sunset is every 4 years for the boards and bureaus under the Department of Consumer Affairs. But obviously, due to the COVID pandemic, it was pushed. That is the reason it was pushed to 5 years this time. So we did alter all the charts and so on to include all 5 years, to not leave a year out. So as I said, we're just going to kind of go section by section, starting with the table of contents. I think I can share my screen, David, if everyone just gives me just a moment.
You should be able to.
As soon as you start sharing. Okay, there we go. Go away. I think I can push, can I put that down? Hide floating video. There we go. Okay. So section 1 in the table of contents is the background and description of the Bureau and the regulated profession. So we did list out briefly our history of the Bureau, Advisory Committee. There's also some attachments in the appendices in the back that show our committee members over the past 5 years, any major changes and studies. Of course, we have the fee studies and we have our examinations that we perform each year, and a few changes in leadership over the past 5 years. I was appointed right before the last sunset, so there was no changes in Bureau Chief, but the remaining, all 4 remaining were appointed in this past 5 years of management for the Bureau. Does anyone have any? So now that I'm sharing, I will be unable to see the chat. So if David and Carolina's in here with me as well, you can let me know. Otherwise, just pipe up at any time. The second section, moving on, is to fiscal and staff, provides a fiscal summary. As we know, we did have a fee increase in that 2021 fee proposal that we put out publicly. We did anticipate being solvent through up until 27-28, which we're hoping to take us to our next sunset without any excessive unexpected costs or unexpected costs, and our continued frugal savings, conservative spending that we've always done, especially on a spending freeze at the moment. So that should help our solvency until next fiscal year without any unexpected costs. Does anyone have any questions, any comments on the fiscal? Good morning, welcome, have a seat. All right, moving on to our licensing program. That is in chapter, excuse me, I keep calling them chapters. Section 3, our licensing population, processing, exams, approvals, and of course we don't have continuing education in this industry. So we have about 13,000 licensees. As you know, we have 14 license types. 2 staff in the licensing unit perform these duties. At this time, I do not believe that we have any licensing barriers, considering only 2 license types require education, and we do have 5 license types that require an entrance exam of California law exam, in addition to the sciences section national exam for embalmers. We have implemented all of our processes to expedite members of the military and their spouses and partners, and so that has all been completed as they've come up in these past 5 years. I think we're a very effective licensing section, but I would love to hear any comments on that. Anything? We are meeting our licensing performance measures for complete applications received. You know, I'm always looking for improvements. So as we move into business modernization, we're hoping to streamline those instructions and what's needed to have a larger population of completed applications upon receipt. So that kind of takes care of licensing. Scroll up here a little bit. The enforcement program. All right, section 4 is our enforcement program. You will see that the statistics for enforcement are back in section 13. Section 12 is where all of our statistics are, but you will see in those statistics that we have seen an increased enforcement workload, additional complaints resulting in, additional accusations, revocations, citations. However, it's still a very low percentage to the amount of licensees we have. Mostly, we have met our performance measures, our processing times, apart from completing formal discipline of a license. So formal discipline of a license, that includes going to the Attorney General's office and pursuing revocation or a settlement of some sort, probation. Those do take a little bit longer, so we have not met many performance measures in that area. But all the other areas internally and such, we are meeting those enforcement measures. Additionally, in the area of enforcement, we prioritize our complaints that we receive. So anything that's egregious, threat to public health, safety, or welfare, any time-sensitive issues like pending disposition, failure to release a body, or an abandoned business. Additionally, high importance is fraud or embezzlement that's been found. So all of those are prioritized, and we'll get, although we process, for the most part, as we do have to prioritize those that take priority, like those that I just mentioned. As part of enforcement, we also perform unannounced inspections. We have a mandate to inspect every cemetery, crematory, and a percentage of cremated remains disposers and brokers. So we do those. We have been meeting those mandates. And then we're also inspecting funeral establishments either every other year or annually, or more often if needed. What's unique to the Bureau, of course, is our fiduciary responsibility to the consumer and the oversight of the trust funds held in funeral establishments and the endowment care trust funds held at cemeteries. So we review an annual report provided by a licensee of an independent audit, just to ensure that those deposits are being made timely from the time of the contract to getting it into the trust, and that it's being invested conservatively and being used for what it's mandated to be used for. So we do monitor those funds for compliance with the Act. That's all my notes for the enforcement section. Does anybody have anything? Because I did not pause there. No, okay. Okay, going down to section 5. So public information policies, internet use, our meeting schedule. As we know, we have 2 advisory committee meetings per year at a minimum. If there's reason to hold more, we absolutely will. There has been in the past. And then we also have these stakeholder meetings. All of our meetings are hybrid. We follow the Bagley-Keene Act, although we are not mandated in statute. We still do, because it is a good business practice and good for the consumer to have notification ahead of time. So we go, like I said, twice a year. It's all here in Sacramento is always the public access location. We do post our enforcement actions online. It's linked up to the DCA search, which can be found on our homepage of our website. On DCA, it says verify, or it says check a license. There's 2 places on the website to gather that. And then consumer outreach. I have participated in several consumer groups recently, and especially over the past 5 years, but even more recently, it's been a focus of mine to get out to more consumer groups. Additionally, on top, we've opened up a Facebook and been actively using that, and we have a listserv, or excuse me, an email blast. Not everybody knows what listserv is. It's kind of our term. And also an email blast. Terry looks like he's reaching out. He has a question, but he can't unmute. I think he's on the line. David, can you help him figure out how to unmute?
All right, Terry. I've sent you a request to unmute.
Am I unmuted?
Shrink this down.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Wow.
Good morning, Terry. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And Gina, thank you very much for putting together the review. As you know, not everybody does the review like this, so it's very much appreciated. I just had I had a concern on enforcement.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out what the nexus is here. How many of your cases are priority cases in which they're serious? How many, what's the trend? Where are we spending most of our time? Where are most of the complaints related? Because if I look, and maybe I'm just seeing this differently, that if we have between 646 cases to 876 complaints a year, but it looks like the total disposition of them all is right around 40. So are we looking at a situation where there are very few priority cases? And if so, where are we spending most of our time on enforcement? What's the majority of the concerns in the cases?
I would say that the highest concerns would be the ones that would end up at the Attorney General's office for formal discipline. So
how many of those are there? How many of those are there? We
range over there between 10 and 15 cases at any given time. I don't have the numbers of how many we referred, but I think I can, getting to my statistics. Let me get to my statistics page. Sorry, there's a lot of licensing. So, I would have to count it by.
It's okay, Jill, we can talk offline. I don't want to hold everybody up.
Okay. Oh no, that's what this is for. This is casual and discussion-y. So yes, I can say. What I'm trying
to get at is, does it appear that for the most part we're adhering to the rules, that these are minor complaints that result in warnings and citations, and very few result in serious investigation?
Yeah, so yeah, citations and fines, we're ranging anywhere from, about 200 to 300 citation and fines per year. And the accusations that we filed range, we had 13 in 1 year, but went down to 4. That's pretty low. The next year, I think that was 2020. And then we range about 10, 9, and 6. So the ones that are egregious, the ones that are higher priority, those would be the ones that we would file an accusation against, which, yes, I agree, that's a low number for 13,000 licensees. And then, of course, citations range about anywhere from 200 to 300 there. But I'm happy to talk offline also with you as well.
One last
please,
question.
Yes, what's your next question?
Yeah, and how many enforcement personnel do we have?
We have 8 field representatives throughout the state that perform the investigations and mandated inspections. And then in-house, we have 2 analysts and a manager that review those investigations and make recommendations. We only have 1 person designated as the Attorney General liaison that works on the formal disciplinary cases, and 1 person that issues all the citations. So that takes care of, I think, the entire enforcement program.
So I think if we look at this, I mean, there's a lot to be proud of here then. I mean, you're doing comprehensive work, and for the most part, it appears that our 13,000 licensees are doing a pretty doggone good job of staying in line and making sure that we're representing our industry and taking care of our consumers pretty well.
Yes, I would agree that these numbers absolutely show that. And I think I've always kind of tooted that out there when I make presentations, that this is, a great industry to regulate. I would also include that our audits unit can be considered enforcement/compliance, because they're the ones that overview the trust funds. So that is another group of 6. I wanted to just add that in there.
Well, thank you.
But
Great
I agree,
work,
Terry.
Yeah, great work, Gina.
Great.
That's good news.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's a great position to be in.
You can put me back on mute now. Unmute.
Okay.
Well,
all right. Well, speak up anytime, Terry. Thank you.
This is the moderator, Gina.
Yes.
Have a question for you. Can I propose something a little wild? I would like to bring everybody up into the panelists so they can unmute at will, and then if things get out of control, we can maybe reverse it.
I don't think we will, but that would be an exciting meeting. Yes, please put everybody up to panelists. I think that's a great idea, David.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, I forgot where we were. Well, answering the question. Oh, so we're on to section 5, public information. Oh, I think I made a comment on that already. I think we're on 6, online practice issues. Okay, so we're moving on to section 6, online practice issues. Online practice, it is obviously cemeteries have a physical place. of business, it is required that funeral establishments also have a physical place of business. So there really isn't full online practice that can happen. There has to be a physical place where consumers can go. However, over the past 5 years, we have seen a growth in our businesses using the internet to reach additional consumers and additional customers. So a review of a website is something we do as part of our inspection process. There are some mandates in the law of what you have to have on your website if you have one, but it isn't required. But online practice issues are monitored at the Bureau. If we find something, if we see something, if somebody reports something, the Bureau does have authority to open up a Bureau-initiated complaint. It doesn't necessarily have to come from someone. It's just if we see something, we can open up a complaint and investigate that issue. But we do not see a lot of issues on online practice. Okay. Workforce development, section 7. So there's 2 topics. Oh no, there's several topics in section 7. Workforce development, I have placed on our website. I went to the CANA annual meeting, and 2 of the, I don't know if we should call them associations, have joined together to put forth what's called Journey to Serve. We do notice that our military numbers are very low. So those military members are not leaving their military service and coming into the funeral industry or the cemetery industry. So Journey to Serve is a way that we can show that their services that they do in the military, how that relates to the services in the funeral and cemetery industry. So I have been bringing those flyers when I've gone to outreach events, and I've also posted on our website. We're doing additional postings on that to kind of help a little bit of workforce development specific to those in the military. We did see, during the COVID-19 that there was a shortage, not only because individuals were getting sick, but because some people were just walking out because it was so overwhelming during that time. But the Bureau hasn't received any real outcries for workforce development, but I'm always open to that topic on how the Bureau can assist in that area. I do speak to the students at, I have spoken to the students with Jolena. I'm also speaking to students at American River, just talking to them about the Bureau and all of the different areas. I know they're already on a path, but you never know. If they don't finish mortuary science school, it doesn't mean they can't still work in industry. So I'm also speaking to students. At this time, overall, we're meeting our processing time for licensing delays. As I said, I do not believe licensing, but I'm also talking to applicants, obviously, at schools about licensing, how to get licensed quickly and efficiently. We've also seen some great legislation for businesses, for example, the crematory assignment that will now creates a continuity of business during a license change, during ownership change. So, we are definitely working on continuity of license, and again, automating applications will help with licensing processing. I kind of already spoke to barriers and workforce development. Hey, Jared, go ahead.
I'll add a little maybe positive comment too on COVID is that hopefully one of the lessons learned, all of us, was that this industry is an essential service during these times. Absolutely. Because there was such a quick rush to unprecedented actions. I think that's one of our takeaways, is to make sure early on that the right people know in all levels of government that this industry needs to continue and to ramp up. Also get some focus, not just the health industry. Absolutely. Jerry and I and many of us were very loud during that time to become essential as fast as possible. So I appreciate the work during that time. But yes, we are essential, and hopefully everybody knows that now. It is of utmost importance. Okay, moving on to section 9. Bureau actions and responses to COVID. Great transition. Oh, did I miss? Oh, 8, current issues. I'm so sorry. Current issues.
The uniform standards for substance abusing licensees, we don't have that. That's not, that's a health industry requirement. So CPEI is what we call Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative. CPEI, shortened version, is our enforcement performance measures. So how long does it take us to receive a complaint, assign it to an investigator? How long does it sit on the investigator's desk before it goes to either no violation citation or the Attorney General's office? And then how long does it take to issue the citation? And how long does it take at the Attorney General's office if it goes those two routes? So although we're not mandated to follow CPEI, because that is, again, for health boards, all DCA boards and bureaus follow those enforcement performance measures. They're also available and accessible on the DCA data portal. Just going to Google and saying DCA data portal, you can see all of the performance measures for both enforcement and licensing. And of course, you can get raw data of numbers of licensees and lots of raw data from that data portal. The last topic is Breeze. I really wish this was renamed in the sunset as business modernization. Breeze is a specific platform that helped several boards and bureaus modernize their businesses. But as each group has gone online and started the bidding process, there have been other platforms that have been more user-friendly or more affordable or whatever better fit to us. So we are using what's called CFB Connect. I'm sure everybody is tired of me talking about it. So we are moving forward with both licensing applications going online. The next one is going to be a more cohesive consumer complaints form and way to track your complaints. We'll work on the back office of enforcement and then get back to getting the rest of those licenses online. So we're currently in a project with DCAs, the departments. We're working with their IT team underneath the California Department of Technology. Their leadership has been amazing during this project, and we're expecting a lot more to happen this next year. You're going to start seeing applications just fly up. So we really built the foundation, and we're ready to really get things out forward facing. We're looking forward to it. That takes care of that. So you may have questions on BizMod is what we call it. Anything else? Okay. Section 9. Now we're at Bureau actions and responses to COVID. I think everybody here is pretty familiar with how this industry got through COVID, but we were quick to act, and I really appreciate working with both associations during that time. The funeral directors really had to step up during that time. Obviously, storage was an issue. I'm grateful for the counties there at the end to host the storage facilities because that was becoming one of the highest priority issues there. We also had licensed embalmers allowed to come over and embalm during that time, which was very helpful because we had so much storage issues. So all in all, I think we worked great together as a team to get this state through COVID-19 in one of people's most hardest and devastating times to lose someone that way, not being by their side and stuff. So I just really appreciate the industry, all 13,000 licensees that carried Californians through that very difficult time. We worked with CDPH for standards and put out things, and we were very active on our website and so on, and our emails. So that really set a precedent of how to act quickly and how working together we can really get things done. That's all I really have to say. COVID, I'm sure we beat that in all the meetings. So okay, section 10. So so for every sunset review report that goes up to the legislature, when they review it, they provide the Bureau back what's called a background paper. So these are the new issues that they would like the Bureau to speak to and potentially work on over the next 4 years. So in this section is the prior 8 issues that were brought to the Bureau. You can kind of move that up a little bit. I can actually even make this bigger because if people are on small screens, oh gosh, I should have done that a while ago. Okay, sorry everybody. So The 8 issues are right there. Fluctuations to pro rata, that was a big conversation several years ago. The Department of Consumer Affairs gets paid a certain amount from each board and bureau, and they host human resources, Office of Information Services, which is IT, legal, contracting and purchasing, fiscal budget. They provide all of those services. This allows the Bureau to better focus on our mission and get the workload done that we need to get done forward-facing to consumers and to our licensees. I'm very supportive of the Bureau. I believe they provide excellent, very high-quality services to the Bureau, and I don't see any issues with the pro rata. It isn't just a flat amount per board and Bureau. It is based on the size of the Bureau and a few other things. So, for example, we're not paying the same as a huge board with, 150 people. So it is based on our size. Endowment care rates, those were raised since the last sunset. So that answers kind of that question. The next report is not due till 2029. So that's when that will be looked at and addressed again. We'll probably be beginning, well, I'll talk more about that when we get to section 11. Licensing fees, again, I kind of already spoke to that under the fund condition. Status of Breeze, again, just BizMod, kind of we've really attacked that. I would say that right after this sunset last time when I got hired, my first action was to put all the renewals online. Since then, we put the cemetery salesperson online, the funeral director, and next will be an original funeral establishment. After that, we'll have some enforcement stuff going in, and then we'll get back to more applications. Potential regulation of pet crematories. So we have not received another issue or concern in pet crematories. The discussion kind of changed over the past 5 years, and we do have a bill in suspense. It was 528 Irwin last year, and of having a separate place of a licensed cemetery to allow for pet burials. So instead of overseeing the crematory side, overseeing pet burials within our currently licensed cemeteries. That went into suspense. I am uncertain if it will come out of suspense this session. They were very open to our technical advice, Irwin's team, last session. So, I'm sure we'll be happy to work together if it does. Number of delinquent licenses, like I said, to address this, I put online renewals right away to avoid increased delinquent licenses. Ongoing maintenance, we'll talk about that in section 11. Typically when we see maintenance issues, it is for the older cemeteries and at the end of their economic life. So that will be discussed in section 11. And of course, the last issue is always whether to continue regulation. So I feel we're doing a great job regulating the industry, keeping consumers protected and licensees informed. I know there's always strides and that we can make there. We'll continue to work on that.
Hey,
I'm
Gina,
open to opportunities on how. Yes.
this is Terry again.
Is that Terry?
I just think it's
Terry.
really important. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Gina?
we can hear you.
Yeah. I just think it's really important that we mention what a great job you did on the Irwin bill, because I think that there were a lot of questions that needed to be raised and a lot of questions that needed to be raised in a very reasonable manner. And I think that the Bureau was a large part of really bringing discussion to this, so that it wasn't rushed through. And I thought all of the questions you raised go to the core of what we do for consumers and what we do in terms of our mission and what we do in terms of what kind of conflicts can arise, by doing something that's much more revolutionary than it sounds. And I just thought you did a great job. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Terry. Yes, the Bureau worked very hard with the Irwin team on really setting out guidelines and how to get it to make sense for our current act and the way our act is written. Our act only speaks to human remains. over and over and over again. It never speaks to any other remains. So the amount of change that would cause in the act and how to work in a pet remains was tricky. So yeah, thank you.
Including what's a pet?
Including what's a pet. Still not defined. So, but it did allow the cemeteries that bandwidth so then they can make that decision themselves, you know. So yeah, thank you, Terry. I really appreciate that feedback.
Gina, this
Yes.
is David.
Oh, yes, David.
I believe Jolene is also looking for an opportunity to speak.
Oh, cool. That's fine. Go ahead, Jolena.
Thanks. I am particularly interested in issue number 6 with the number of delinquent licenses and how the increase in fees, especially renewal fees, may need to be considered in terms of a possible increase in the number of delinquent licenses, despite the online renewals that have streamlined the ability to not go delinquent. Is that something that would be mentioned in this section, or would you anticipate questions about it and then respond verbally when under examination?
Yeah, yes, because this actually falls in 2 sections, licensing population being 1 and delinquent licenses being 2. They're intertwined. So if you look at the previous sunset, I think we had 13,400 licensees and we're down to 13,000. So we were getting calls saying, well, I'm not going to renew then. So I do think that it contributed. I can't, you know, of course, nobody tells us why they don't renew their license. That's not something that data that we gather. But we did get several of those phone calls. So I can say it was a contributing factor as we did receive a number of phone calls telling us that. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And mostly I will be speaking to it if questioned. I may include it in just my opening talking points, depending on how long I'm given to speak. Okay, Jerry also had a question.
Well, just thinking under this section, you know, in the legislative reception and then consideration, could there be maybe a couple of questions or inquiries regarding the status and expectation on the regulatory package for human composting?
No, reduction, natural organic reduction. We're eliminating that word. Yes, so natural organic reduction, I believe there might be some questions not only about reduction, but also about hydrolysis. Hydrolysis did take a while to get implemented. Public Health had to put through their regulations to approve the machine. That took a while. And then, of course, we were ready once they put those through to license our first hydrolysis application. There's currently only 1 license still in San Diego. It really is up to the cities and counties at this point whether they'll allow hydrolysis facilities to come into their city or county, whether the hydroslate or the affluent, what's the word, can go affluent, can go down the drain. It kind of goes back and forth. Maybe it's the same thing. Can go down the drain or get hazardous waste removal. Even then, a city, even if you do hazardous waste removal, it would be up to them to approve that. Natural organic reduction goes into effect in 2024, 2029. So it goes in 2027. 29 is the sufficiency study. So we're actually going to be beginning our regulatory package here. At the second half of this year. So fiscal 24-25, at the beginning of fiscal, we'll start working on regulatory package. I did visit Washington State and the 3 that are open and assisting consumers now to see that, to see how it works. New York also just passed a bill, so it's allowed over in New York, and their regulations are already out. So we'll be definitely referencing our sister states and seeing what works best here, and then we're working closely with CDPH as they are also in this bill required to approve the machine prior to applying here at the Bureau. So we're already in conversations with them. So we're looking forward to that regulatory package and really getting input from not only our stakeholders in California, but anyone with knowledge and expertise in this area, as it's so new. So, I mean, so new to the nation. Okay. All right, we're going to section 11. This is really our last section here today. But new issues, so the purpose of new issues is for the Bureau or the program to look at the trends in the industry and see where there are gaps or where there doesn't need any future regulation here or gaps in regulation here or oversight, and to really bring that to the attention of the legislature to see if they think that this, you know, is a serious enough trend to be regulate or implement new laws. So the Bureau has brought forth 3 new issues. And this is, of course, really related to the things that have been happening the past couple years that the Bureau's taken note of. So issue 1 is the perpetual care and maintenance of abandoned cemeteries. So initially, to become a cemetery, one must go to the city and get a piece of property that is zoned for cemetery. As we know, cemeteries are in perpetuity, so zoned for a cemetery and allow interments. Then, you know, you apply for licensure, and we license about 192 cemeteries. So of the thousands that are in California, only 192 are owned by private businesses, corporations, or LLCs. So a private corporation or LLC does have the right to no longer do business. We find that this happens in cemeteries when they become at the end of their economic life, meaning there's very few sales or no sales left. There's no spaces left. There's no more room to put a mausoleum. Maybe there's no room for niches, and there's no way for this company to stay open and continue business. We'll also start seeing maintenance declines. So when I spoke to Section 10 about maintenance issues, the Bureau does tend to see that maintenance issues are for those cemeteries that are underfunded in the endowment care and out of spaces to sell. So they just don't have the funds to continue maintaining the property. So that piece of property becomes abandoned either 2 ways. Either the licensee surrenders their license and just says, I want it canceled, and they cannot find a buyer, or the Bureau pursues enforcement action because of the lack of care of the cemetery. It starts becoming dilapidated. So this act was written in 1939 and 1949, and I do not believe at that time our cemeteries were old enough to really flush out what happens to this piece of property that has you know, our community members, our loved ones, historical figures buried there. What happens to that piece of property when the humans that are running the business, you know, need to walk away for whatever reason it is. So because of that, we have seen this happen. Well, there's been 3 that I can speak to off the top of my head. There's been 2 in Southern California that became abandoned, and they are just abandoned, and they're beginning to deteriorate. There is 1 in Southern California that actually, through the public city process, turned it into a city cemetery. That was Sunnyside in Long Beach. That was a very successful turnover to the city, and that one is now very well being kept up very well. So our recommendation, if you're following along, is on page 63 of section 11. I'm just going to read it instead of paraphrase. So the Bureau recommendation is to enhance consumer protection and protect cemetery property from becoming desolate and places of reproach within communities. The Bureau requests the legislature consider amending current statute to vest the responsibility of perpetual care with the jurisdiction that authorized the underlying use. These statutes may potentially be similar to Health and Safety Code sections 8825 through 29. However, the statute should mandate action and be specific to endowed cemeteries previously licensed under the Bureau. So that's exactly what it does. is once it becomes abandoned. In that section I referenced, that does have like a time frame, you know, so it's not immediate that it goes back to the jurisdiction that authorized it, but eventually we know that this cemetery, this piece of property will be taken care of in perpetuity once that happens. So does anyone want to speak? All three are kind of intermingled, but you know, please pause and let me know if anyone will speak. Go ahead, Jerry.
A couple of just thoughts, you know.
Yes, please.
To add, you know, with our industry group, the Cemetery Mortuary Association of California, I know that endowment care funds and their purpose and objective is a theme that goes back to the 30, you know, we're very involved in and support the purpose and goals and objectives of endowment care funds. And so on the issue of abandoned cemeteries, we recognize that as an issue. We know that, you know, working together with the legislature and the Bureau over the last several years, there have been some strides taken, and we've sponsored some of these ideas that we hope will go long-term to address this in some fashions. First, like we talked about, the increase in the minimum deposits into endowment care funds to be significantly increased, and supported that, and glad that that's enacted. Second, in terms of the endowment care funds themselves, supporting the modernization of the investment approach so that cemeteries can use a unit trust or net income distribution method that will grow the funds over time. A third is the idea of the maintenance standards themselves. The legislation that established the requirement for maintenance standards was born in an abandoned cemetery down in Southern California, which was a public cemetery. It wasn't a regulated cemetery, but the legislature, in its final act, established the requirement for the Bureau to adopt maintenance standards that are now on the books and are the law. And in addition to learning more about these approaches that are here in the Sections 11 and working together with the Bureau and legislature, our commitment is we wonder if there are ways to look at what, now that we have some data, I know in the we talk about more data being developed, to look at those root causes of what lead these cemeteries to be abandoned, and to look at what tools are maybe already there, such as the inspections, such as looking at the website, such as looking at the annual reports, and to look at those causes and see what can be done ahead of the abandonment. Because that's the most difficult situation is when you have those abandoned cemeteries at the city, you know, looking at them, and they often hesitate. And so I think one of the discussion items we would like to bring in is that, you know, what additional tools when you know, those maintenance standards are quite extensive, and we know during COVID it was difficult, during droughts it's difficult, but if there's a situation where the Bureau knows or finds, together with the city, you know, if we find that there is it's leading towards abandonment, what can we do before that happening, instead of maybe developing a government role in perpetuity with properties that is a whole different kind of role for for the Bureau and for cities as well. So we don't have the definite suggestions, but we think that kind of discussion, there are different, all these actions that have been taken lead to that. And we all share the purpose, you know, the goal. We don't want cemeteries to be abandoned. So I just add that in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
If I
Anything
may
you do
take
ahead
a
of time?
moment.
I think it. Oh yeah, please.
Finish what you're saying, and then I'd like to interrupt.
I was just gonna say that, you know, anything that we can do to prevent it from being abandoned in the first place, I mean, that would be a definite goal of the Bureau. I mean, seeing a cemetery become abandoned and dilapidated is heartbreaking, and it's awful for the community. Not only are their loved ones there and the community there, it brings down the whole community around it. You know, I think back when this started, there was always like, oh, well, cemetery can just get more land. But as communities have grown, they've grown around these cemeteries, and that's not even an option anymore for so many of them. to get more space. So go ahead, David.
Just wanted to note that we have a new participant who appears to have an audio-only connection. Alex, if you truly have an audio-only connection, you will need to dial *6 to mute and unmute yourself, and you are welcome to do so at will.
Yes,
That's
please. Anytime. This is more of a discussion, so please just pipe in anytime. Okay. I appreciate that discussion in number one, and I think actually issue number 2 will kind of relate to that ahead of time type of planning, because issue number 2 is to endowment care sufficiency study, which is due January 1, 2029. The last one was due to legislature in 2017. We're requesting a licensee reporting mandate. So the study, the 2017 endowment care sufficiency study, was an unprecedented report. And so the Bureau at the time created a task force made up of, large corporations, small mom and pops. We tried to represent every area, and we actually had a reporting of 193 cemeteries participated in that study out of 194. So all but one reported information in that study. This time we're going to be using relatively the same data points. If there's a need to change that, or there's a need, we're open to conversations on what the future data points will look like to build a great next sufficiency study. But we do need all the licensees again to participate in order to make an informed recommendation to the legislature, because we will need to recommend and report on what our findings are. So without full participation, our findings will be short. It is just a mandate for all licensees to respond to the Bureau for a sufficiency study. I do believe they'll set another one, of course, after the 2029 one is done. So the recommendation, I'll read it again. The Bureau requests the legislature consider amending current statute to mandate reporting from all licensed cemetery authorities to support the required report pursuant to BPC section 761211. Oh, you know what I should be doing? I should just be doing this, right? Oh, wrong one. A little bit smaller, everybody, but it kind of puts our issues. So that was issue number 2. Okay, so both of these issues have been discussed previously in this sunset report. So the way that the legislature has split it is, what stuff we know about and tell me about your issues. Now, what are the things that are not previously discussed in the report that are issues? So issue number 3 is the conservatorship of endowment care funds of licensed cemeteries. The Bureau already has authority to conserve endowment care funds if they find that the cemetery authority has done certain things. There's a whole list of things. There's embezzlement, fraud, violating the act, obviously in relation to the trust fund. But the Bureau is requesting clarity as to who can hold endowment care funds. Cemetery endowment care funds, there are several statutes in the law in regards to how to handle and hold an endowment care. So it is obviously the legislature's goal that the Bureau have oversight of these funds just to ensure that they're protected. This one is a long one, and the recommendation is long too, you guys. So we're asking mostly just for clarity within the law that those that are allowed to oversee an endowment care fund are the Bureau, the licensee, of course, and then if issue number 1 goes through and a city or county takes over an abandoned cemetery, then the Bureau should be able to give them the endowment care funds so that they can maintain that cemetery. as one of their public or pioneer cemeteries. And of course, it would still have to be used as it's mandated to be used, but it would be then their responsibility of the fund itself. So I'm going to read the recommendation word for word again, just so that we're super clear on what the Bureau is asking for. I'm sorry, it's a little bit longer than the rest. So an endowment care fund is bound to the cemetery property and those consumers buried there. Each burial contract includes a line item for a consumer to pay the cemetery to deposit into the fund. Until the future of a cemetery is determined, the Bureau should be vested with the protection of these consumer funds, meaning that it's been abandoned, not our current licensees. They're obviously holding their own funds. In order to protect the endowment care funds and perform the Bureau's fiduciary responsibility to the consumers who have purchased spaces while the cemetery was licensed, the Cemetery and Funeral Act must include clear and concise, of course, that's the word I messed up on, clear and concise language that, one, identifies the entities allowed to hold endowment care funds, licensed cemetery authorities, the Bureau, and with Bureau approval, the city or county in which the cemetery is situated if it is transitioned to a public district cemetery or pioneer cemetery, in accordance with the issues identified in section 11 above. Two, amends current statute to state that when a previously licensed cemetery becomes unlicensed due to abandonment, cancellation, surrender, or revocation of the license, the Bureau shall conserve the fund. And three, authorizes the Bureau to conserve the endowment care fund when a cemetery authority voluntarily surrenders the fund to the Bureau. I'll speak to more of that in a second. I think it relates to Jerry's comment earlier. Currently, Business and Profession Code Sections 7613.9 and 7613.10 allow the Bureau to conserve the endowment care fund under certain conditions. The Bureau believes that adding additional clarifying language in this section and adding a new section identifying what entities may hold endowment care funds is a necessary mechanism for the protection of consumer funds. That's our recommendation. I'm going to jump back to number 3. Authorizes the Bureau to conserve endowment care funds when a cemetery authority voluntarily surrenders the fund to the Bureau. So in speaking to what we can do prior to abandonment, a lot of cemeteries, once they have become full, there's very limited people that work there, or almost full. So 2 or 3 people work there, they open and close the gates, there's really no sales to be made. Holding an endowment care fund, they have to perform an independent audit each year, which can cost more than the sales that they have made. So they're in the red each year, which means they're not going to stay. They're going to have to walk away. So what has been requested of the Bureau by these licensees is, can you just conserve the funds and just make distributions and reimbursement for approved costs? So right now, as the fiduciary and conservator of a few of the funds that have been conserved by the Bureau, we do have a process to allow reimbursements for what the fund is to be made for. As the conservator, we have the responsibility to ensure the fund is being used properly and that it's helping the cemetery, not just hold it and watch it grow. So, you know, coming up with a process of reimbursement to those that are still working the cemetery, they could potentially still be owned and licensed. Just a conservatorship of a fund does not mean that it's unlicensed. We have funds of people that are still licensed through, you know, that's kind of through disciplinary issues and such, through those 2 statutes mentioned. So that allows a cemetery authority to not have to pay those fees, not have to do that independent audit, and then ask for reimbursements for the maintenance that they perform. That's the background to number 3. This has been very helpful for some of our really small 100-year-old cemeteries because their audits, they were telling us, were over $5,000 and they weren't even making those kinds of sales. So that's the background on number 3. Does anybody have more comments on our third issue that kind of all related? Yes, Jerry, please.
Some thoughts or questions. So it would be interesting to know the exact, you know, the specific situations where the Bureau stepped in, like how many what's that existing list?
Yes, that's public.
Okay,
Mhm.
I could see value in that, and knowing, knowing the role that's already there, that you're trying to get defined in statute,
Yeah,
clarified.
right.
And and it sounds like perhaps that this is also being done for, if it's a pioneer cemetery, it's not a regulated cemetery.
Right.
So it might be happening now with non-licensees. And then, but they are, they have laws that apply to them too. So that's interesting. The population and the, those that have run out of space that are pioneer that haven't been full for long, or just a.
Right. There's no cemetery business being performed. Yeah. Right.
And then another is to, I could see some value of a discussion, making sure there's not an incentive to abandon. If it's known that, okay, when I run out of space, if I don't have an adequate endowment care fund, I'm just going to turn it over to the Bureau, and we still got our jobs, and we don't want that to happen either.
Right. They would still have to be licensed if they still had their jobs and were performing cemetery operations. You can't.
But they have you run the Bureau runs the fund, and then we just take care of the maintenance, and that could become an incentive to do so, and none of us want that to happen.
I haven't had any licensees that have been, except for, like I said, the ones that are pretty full. I haven't had any licensees that are very willing to just hand over the endowment care fund. That has not been a trend. So I don't want to create that kind of trend.
Sure.
And the Bureau has to approve it. We have to go through Superior Court. So none of this is done just because the Bureau says so. Looking into 7613.9 and .10, it has to be through a court hearing. And it can't be through the Attorney General's office, the licensing side, although the Attorney General still represent us, but not through the licensing section. It's actually filed in Superior Court as stated by the statute. So it's a judge that ultimately determines if the Bureau can conserve the fund. So that's helpful. That's helpful to not allow those kinds of situations. Yeah. So the judge has to find reason for the Bureau to conserve it. And then the judge has to find reason for the Bureau to unconserve it. So let's say 5 years goes by and now somebody wants to come in and be a licensee. Well, then we get them in, we get them licensed. This has actually happened to one of our, I think it's called East Union, that we conserved the funds. Then there was a volunteer group that was just kind of keeping it open and not letting it get, community members just volunteering. We actually held their hand and walked them through to get licensed, and then we went back to court and can give them back the funds. So, and that would be up to the determination of a judge also. So that was definitely another success story.
Gina, this is
really what we want to. Go ahead.
How much more workload does this create for Bureau staff, and how are you planning if there are these changes made to be able to substantiate that additional workload?
So the workload will fall on the audit unit. We have 6 associate management auditors, 1 staff auditor, and 1 staff managing auditor. So a total of 8, but 6 who perform the actual work of annual reviews and such. I can't, the workload that I have to give you is based out of 2017 from the sufficiency study. So it is outdated. I won't have better numbers till we do another sufficiency study. But at that time, there were 43 cemeteries. I think it was 43. And 17, especially out of those 43, that were either out of spaces to sell or limited spaces to sell. So really the Bureau's concern is somebody cancels their license and walks away with the endowment care fund. I mean, that's the big fear, right? That we don't want that to happen. This is consumer money. How can we protect it, obviously, in perpetuity when people walk away from the property? So it could be, I could say that we could have 43 funds at one time, but I really don't think that's a practical number to give us. And the workload is minimal considering it would be in a trust company and we'd be working through reimbursements. We have a pretty clear process of how to do it. So it's less than, the workload itself, I say, is less than the review of an annual report from that cemetery. Because remember, if we have the endowment care fund, we're no longer getting that outside independent audit from the cemetery authority to provide a review and the once every 5-year mandate for an examination, a full examination of the fund. So we'll lose that workload over here to bring on this workload over here. So until we get more funds, I don't know how to measure that, but that's definitely something we're considering, and we're trying to keep the processes as streamlined and easy as possible for, you know, for disbursements of the funds and obviously the care of it. You have a thought?
Unless Jolena, I don't.
Oh, did you have another thought, Jolena?
No, thank you very
appreciate
much
that
for
question.
the explanation. I'll defer to Jerry's question now.
Okay.
Well, just you get questions. The more you
Yes, that's the point. I love it.
Yeah, so when there's an abandoned cemetery, how much is there in an endowment care fund for the Bureau to conserve? What's the, I would say like Lincoln Memorial Park is the one that's been in the most news, and it's about $1 million, which is why he can't seem to find anyone to purchase the property, is because the income made from $1 million, as you know, you may know, is not enough to cover the maintenance of a, how many acres is it? 10? 20 acre cemetery. Luckily, that cemetery only has 2 mausoleums and maybe 2 statues, so there's not a lot of above ground that needs maintenance. But yeah, that's the crux of it, is no one really wants to step in and care for it because there's not enough money in the fund, and if there's no business to be made, then how do they cover those maintenance costs? and then in that situation, the idea of having building up the clarity and responsibility for the Bureau to serve and save some money, the audit, et cetera, is, you know, would there be enough money to properly maintain based on $1 million? So what is the Bureau actually accomplishing in that situation?
Of conserving the funds?
Conserving the funds, if there aren't enough funds.
Right. Well, the Bureau is still protecting what the consumer's initial deposits were.
Yeah.
That's why I'm glad you asked that question, because we're the regulatory authority. We can't start maintaining cemetery property.
Right.
So, you know, all of these recommendations are really specific to mostly abandoned cemeteries because that's the trend we're seeing. So if recommendation number 1 goes through, then cities and counties have cemeteries. They all have public district cemeteries. They have pioneer cemeteries without, you know, endowment care funds and so on. So that's why that money would then go to the city or county. They can do things for a lot cheaper, using city and county workers, using, you know, parks and rec, you know, whatever it is they determine to care for it, and then provide, I'm sorry to say, but the minimum amount of care that the fund can cover.
I can see that coming out in the conversation.
Yeah, because it's got to be a full circle, because if one doesn't go through, then the Bureau's just going to sit here with all this money, and we're going to have to decide, you know, how to do it. We can't.
And then if the Bureau does it, you've got the good actors paying for that program. You know, get to Jelena's question, you know, workload. If that exists, then basically you have the licensure fees being paid by the currently operating properties that are putting money into their endowment care funds. They're sort of paying, you know, for the actors who have failed, you know, to still.
Right.
So that's a philosophical issue, you know, a policy issue.
Right. That's why you can't, the state can't mandate somebody to operate a business that's failing. There's no, that's impossible. We're Californians. We live in America. We can't force a business to continue operating while they're losing money. And as reported in 2017, these funds are where they are. The endowment care rates were raised to our recommended 2017 number today in January 1st, 2024. So, you know, we lost those 4, 5, 6, 7 years already to build up these funds. So they were 17 on the hinge, and we're monitoring those very, very closely. But I am definitely open to ideas on what happens when somebody has the right to walk away from their business. And the property itself is zoned specifically as a cemetery. So it's got to be full circle. It's got to get back to the original group, the original city or county that authorized its use as a cemetery forever. And then that avoids the Bureau continuing to hold endowment care funds as people walk away. And it's going to happen because it's just, there's been some cemeteries out there that have really grasped and have a great following of other events. I mean, we really need to start getting creative. I've seen that in a lot of the conferences and virtual things that I've attended, cemeterians really brainstorming on how to make additional monies when you're starting to run out of sales. And several cemeteries have come up with great ideas to have events and things, but you really got to get that community involvement to get them into your cemetery. You know, pioneer cemeteries have history days and walkthroughs and Day of the Dead, and you know, these wonderful cemeteries have music so you can come and sit with your loved one, and that really brings the community in with that cemetery. I just love what I'm seeing out there is also to prevent. You know, the Bureau can't, we're a regulatory authority, so we can't tell you how to do business. We can't necessarily prevent you from going under, but really seeing what's out there and what's going on is, you know, definitely a benefit to avoid this. This is the last stop. You know, we're preparing for the last stop, and definitely those ones that are almost, the ones that are almost there, they're taking advantage of the unit trust, taking advantage of the increased deposit rates, and, you know, hopefully that will sustain them. Additionally, I think there's in 16 CCR 2333, I know that's just a bunch of numbers, that's our maintenance standards. Title 16 California Code of Regulations 2333 is our maintenance standards, and letter G does say that after a review, the Bureau can inquire as to, you know, what your rates are and what, you know, so the Bureau really needs to assess what G means and looks like as a preventative measure before we get here, before we get to these three issues. What can we do ahead of time to prevent that from happening? But these issues, of course, are already happened. You know, they could be revoked, and then what happens? We don't want a revoked licensee running away with the endowment care fund. They have their business operating funds. That's their money. That's their business money. The Bureau's not trying to come in. I mean, that's why the statute's there. It's mandated that a judge even approve this. The Bureau's not trying to come in and take all the business money and all that. It's just solely the consumer deposits that were made for maintenance. I love the discussion.
Yeah, good.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Yes. Anybody else have discussions? Because this is really
Gina,
the end of it, guys. Yes.
Gina, I just want to add, you know, I don't have cemeteries, and I almost always defer to Jerry on these things. I just don't want this question to become such a morass that licensees, you know, within the Bureau end up holding the bag for something that is not of their making and is not the reason for which they are being charged license fees. I mean, the license fees are specific. It separates them from a tax. And I want to make sure that, again, that this doesn't end up sweeping in people who are not responsible for this situation and shouldn't be forced to pay for it.
Right. That's why I need issue number one is to really transfer that out of the Bureau. Ultimately, when it has become that there is no one that's going to step up. I don't know if that requires a time frame. I know for to become a pioneer cemetery without an endowment care fund, there is like a 5-year, I think, time frame in those codes. And so I don't know what that looks like, but I agree. I don't think the goal is for the Bureau to hold every licensee's endowment care fund at the end of the day. You know, that's not. I don't expect that to happen, considering no one's willingly trying to give that to us ever. But you know, I don't want that to happen, Terry. I appreciate that comment. Okay, any other comments on our new issues? You can see that we stayed very focused on the biggest issues that have been hitting the news, have been hitting the legislature, is these cemeteries where no one wants to buy them, fortunately. I think this will also prevent if a religious corporation comes in or something like that, and then they take the endowment care fund, then it's not regulated, and there's a real high risk for that fund. So it prevents that. So it's really just eliminating the risk when it does happen. So you never eliminate risk, but lowering the risk. Okay, anything else? I think I can stop sharing. There we go.
Gina, this
Okay,
is just
well,
a general
yes.
comment regarding the entire Sunset Review report, and it clearly represents a very comprehensive overview and a summation, a very concise summation of all the Bureau's activities during this particular review period. It's incredibly well written, and I look forward to you reporting back to us how the questioning goes as you appear before those that will be examining you and what we've been able to accomplish with the Cemetery and Funeral Bureau since this last Sunset Review.
Jolena, thank you. I think my favorite word out of that comment was concise. I obviously, as you guys know, through all these meetings, I am incredibly concise. There's no fluff. So I appreciate that. We had a team really work on this report. Carolina was a huge factor. Sandra Patterson, Michelle, Arthur, our audit manager, and Alexia Gallegos, our licensing manager. Getting statistics out of our legacy system is always fun. So it was thorough and concise, and I really appreciate that. The very next step will be a background paper provided by the legislature, and again, that tells me what their questions or concerns are that I will have to respond to. So that is a public document. So my responses, of course, have to go up through the department for approval, but once that happens, that will then be exposed, and then after that, I will testify. Prior sunsets, that background paper hasn't been coming to about maybe just a couple weeks before I testify, so it'll be a quick turnaround time for us on that. And I do not have a date yet on when I will testify, but it will be posted on the website. We'll be sending out email blasts. We'll be putting on Facebook when all of those events are happening, as they happen, to make sure everybody's aware. There's also public comment allowed during my testimony as well. In the past, they've allowed both in-person and a call-in. I'm not sure if that's going to continue this year. I'm sure it probably will, but that will be spoken to as well. So I appreciate your comment. Thank you very much.
Gina, I want to add to that too. I mean, I look at a lot of sunset reports, and you really have, you and your team have done an excellent job. And I've made no secret of the fact that I think you're a superstar. I think that you work as hard as anybody I've ever seen in government. And when Jerry brought up us being essential industry during the beginning of the crisis, we could not have had a better advocate and someone willing to be a conduit to make that happen than you. And I know how deeply proud you are of the job you do and how seriously you take it. I just want to add two things in terms of what I'd like to talk to you offline just to see. I think that I would like to have seen something on the FTC and any kind of conflict between FTC and California guidelines, that perhaps something like that could be addressed. And also the EDRS, that to tighten up responses on EDRS so that the consumer can be dealt with more quickly and with less confusion. But those are peripheral issues. You covered everything else beautifully, and as always, look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Terry. In regards to EDRS, so we don't have any access or control over that. That's with public health. But are you talking about the health and safety code? We call it the 8-day rule, but 8 days to file the death certificate rule?
I am.
In regards, EDR, okay, yep.
So even,
Perfect, okay. Yeah, I think I will be able to
and you
speak
may
to
not have
that.
control over it, but I would guess that somewhere in those 800 complaints you're getting, you probably got complaints on consumers on death certificates and how slow they were in getting them and that kind of stuff.
Yes, and the Bureau takes into consideration, although that statute is very vague, and I mean, it's not, it's very clear cut. This is what you have, 8 days. The Bureau takes into consideration when the funeral establishment received the body, how, who had it before and for how long. So the Bureau does not necessarily, even if a consumer complains about it taking forever, if it's at the coroner's office for 20 days before it gets to the funeral home, we're not citing the funeral home. Even if it sat there 7 days, the funeral home then only had, 1 day at 10 p.m. to get it in before midnight. This does happen. So the Bureau, during an investigation, we ask for a declaration as part of cooperation with an investigation by the managing funeral director, or, if they've deferred us to somebody else, maybe a shareholder or owner. So we do take that into consideration because that is important. It would be nice if everyone had a set of numbers, like the doctor has this many numbers and the coroner has this many days and the funeral, that would be great. But there's a health and safety code that hasn't been amended in a very long time. I appreciate that thought because I think that is a concern to licensees and it's a confusion for consumers. It's an area of confusion for consumers. Very good. And the FTC, I'm looking for, is that 100% final? It's not final and released yet. Hopefully it'll be final and released by the time I testify. Then I can already potentially speak to the changes. Yeah, we are watching that closely. Thank you. I'll keep those topics in mind. And I appreciate all your kudos. You made me blush for sure. I am very proud of this report. I'm very proud of what I do, but I think it's because I have 27 amazing staff. We have great staff. We have recruited great staff. Everyone is responsive. Everyone, is knowing the laws. And I think that DCA providing us the Teams platform has increased our communication and our consistency. So, we're really making strides in that area, and that is definitely a focus, making sure this staff, everything we do affects more than one unit. But historically in government, we become siloed because your job is only doing this. You don't really have that, well, what is my job here? How does that affect the field? How does that affect admin or whatever? So the Bureau is making strides to increase that communication between each unit. And I think that Teams is one way we're doing it. Lots of quick group chats so we can hit everybody at once, along with our normal meetings and, one-on-ones and so on. So I think communication throughout the Bureau is something that we'll always work on, especially with turnover and such. But it's really my staff that make me shine so bright. That is for sure. I did mention, what's currently in this sunset report is a strategic plan that ended in 2023. We started that strategic plan process. DCA has implemented a DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program. And so we had to wait until that effort was completed before we started our strategic plan. We have sent out the survey. I just want to say a special thank you to everyone who responded to the survey, all our committee members. Very special thank you to you. Staff and stakeholders, thank you. And we've already reviewed the environmental scan and are starting to build those goals and objectives. So I unfortunately don't have it in this report or to even give you today, but as soon as it's out, we will be, I'm sure, I want to be sure that it'll be done before our May meeting and be able to be exposed before that. Absolutely. We're on the final stages, but it does have to go through a lengthy review process before it's exposed. So hopefully I can speak to that when I testify. It would be nice if it was even out before March, but I don't know. That's really pushing timelines, especially because DCA is involved in their team. So it's not just the Bureau going, go me going like this, hurry up. So wanted to speak to that too, as it is an attachment within the report. But expect that coming soon. It really drives what we're doing for the next 5 years. So that one's going to be 5 years again, because I was trying to get off the sunset rotation, having them done at the same time, because I really feel that what comes out of sunset should be integrated into the next strategic plan. You know, if there are issues being raised by the legislature, this needs to be considered before we build 5-year or 4 or 5 years of goals and objectives. So as long as no more pandemics happen, I do expect sunset to be on a 4-year cycle. So our strategic plan will come after our next sunset next time, which was my goal this time, but what are you gonna do? COVID, but COVID. Okay, well that concludes us. Is there anything else? Last minute? Raise 30 seconds. I can talk forever. All right, then we'll move to item number 4 on the agenda, which is adjournment. It is 11:25. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone online and in-house with me today. Have a wonderful week. Please reach out if you need anything. Bye.